Corruption subverts the rule of law and due process. It weakens institutions, deters investment, and skews resource distribution. This view is also shared by Gray and Kaufman in a journal published by the International Monetary Fund in 1998, where they asserted that corruption was the primary hindrance to growth and development in African countries. Additionally, this is why you see that even our governments, they've done a lot by establishing bodies that will be fighting corruption, from ICPC to EFCC, and the list goes on. Because it is so obvious that without corruption, you will see that policy implementation will be at 85 to 90%. The money will not be siphoned, money investment will be out of the picture. All the projects that are supposed to be done and budgeted for by the government will be executed and accomplished 100% or between 80 and 90, like I said. All right, so now we know corruption, and it is true that corruption is the primary impediment to the growth and development of African nations. So handling or dealing with corruption now, there is another concept that we're going to engage. That concept is called the problem solution matrix. So now corruption is number one problem that we are facing. Now we'll now engage the concept of problem solving matrix. The problem solving process or matrix. This concept was introduced by Polya in 1945. He argued that by identifying the underlying causes of obstacles, there is a greater likelihood of formulating sustainable practical solutions or strategies that will target the fundamental issues rather than addressing merely the symptoms. The problem prioritization matrix is a tool used to identify and prioritize solutions to complex problems. It involves several steps, such as defining the problem statement clearly, conducting research to understand the root causes of obstacles, brainstorming potential solutions, evaluating each solution based on criteria such as feasibility and impact, and the list goes on. So based on the problem solving process, we have to clearly define what is corruption. Corruption, according to the World Bank, is the abuse of public office for private gain. It undermines economic development, distorts markets, and increases inequality. The World Bank, they work to prevent corruption and promote good governance around the world. And International Transparency, they define corruption to be the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. It can take many forms such as bribery, embezzlement, or nepotism or favoritism. International Transparency is also a worldwide organization that is dedicated to combating corruption and promoting good governance and transparency in government and businesses around the world. Put plainly, corruption refers to any act in violation of or a set of laws, rules, and regulations put in place by a people or a state to oversee or govern the conduct of subjects or individuals in the socio-political system or country or organization, as the case may be, but particularly in the private sector. So in the problem statement, you will understand that in the definition of corruption, you will find the law. In context, you will find systems, because you cannot differentiate laws from systems. Where you see laws one or two, you now see systems. Now you understand that there is also the individual or subject, as the case may be. And finally, you see that there is a socio-political system. There's a socio-political system that is also mentioned. You get? So, to understand the problem of corruption, we must first of all understand what the law means, what system means, the character and behavior of individual as he relates with laws in a system, but in this case particularly in the socio-political system, because as human beings we relate with other laws too in the scientific and academic and in the medical field. We relate with laws, but in order to fight corruption we have to consider how the individual relates with law under these systems. So the fact that you see systems here doesn't mean necessarily mean the same thing. There is a disparity, there is a difference. But as we continue, you would understand what it means. So first of all, we are still within this context. By the time we understand these four, basically, we must have been at the root causes of corruption. You get, must have been at the root causes of corruption. So from there, when we get to the root, you now discover that corruption is at the root causes of all the challenges that are facing our dear nation. So as we advance back up in order to proffer solution, the branches of the problems that have developed, which are poverty, insecurity, inflation, weak institutions, including the justice system, will now be addressing them as the discussion goes further. As we go further, we'll now be addressing them. And finally, we'll get to a sustainable or a comprehensive and systematic solution that will now, assuming corruption is at 100% in African countries. By the time we're done with this course, we must have reduced corruption from 100% down to at least just 15 or 10 based on our capacity and our understanding and in implementing the solution. You should know one thing. There is a difference between walking the path and knowing the path. So this lecture is for us to know the path, know what we must do in order to resolve or curtail the issue of corruption permanently or bring it to a fall so that growth and development can ensue in African countries. So we are going to begin with the law. Now, to study the law, we must begin at the origin. Don't think that even the law will now not begin from the origin of the law. You get, even the law, when we get here, we're going to go back to the origin of the law in order to understand what it means. Even systems will do the same thing, and the individual, the character of the individual when he was alone and when he began to interact with other individuals. According to Jack and Russell, when population began to increase, that is when man had to create some standards of interaction between him and his counterpart or between him and other human beings. That is when it now necessitated that it was detected by nature. It was out of compulsion. It wasn't as a result or as a matter of choice that man decided that let's live under instruction. It wasn't as a gesture that the early man, decided that let's introduce laws into our interactions so that they will now govern the conduct and the behavior of people in the society, as it was now the basic why man moved from the nascent society into the civil society that was governed by laws. It was out of necessity, because when man was living without laws, when there was no criteria to decide what was good, right, or wrong, as it was stated by Thomas Hobbes in his book titled The Levantine, life was short, nasty, and brutal. You get, so out of